Surely you have heard shocking stories about World War II. Stories that immerse you in the darkness of the time. However, one of the least explored and darkest sides of this tragic conflict was the discrimination and ruthless violence against homosexuals. Considered a threat to the purity of the dominant Aryan race, same-sex relationships were brutally condemned as crimes of degeneration. This unleashed a series of atrocious punishments, inhumane experiments, rapes, murders, and unimaginable torture. In this new military history video, you will learn about the heartbreaking experiences of 4 men whose testimonies reveal the atrocities and humiliations they suffered simply for being gay. Their stories not only chronicled their own struggles, but also illuminated the lives of many others who were affected by this terrible chapter in history. Join us on this journey through time as we explore the shocking reality of homosexuals in Nazi Germany. Like many others, they crossed the gates of hell, although under the banner of wearing the striped uniform and an inverted pink triangle that identified them as homosexuals. In their wake, a mockery and their name on a pink list that placed them in the lowest stratum, among those who seemed like they could no longer suffer. Throughout Central Europe, rules criminalizing homosexuality were a reality. In countries such as France, Germany, and Austria, the dreaded paragraph 175 was established, a legal provision that made any man susceptible to arrest, prosecution, and prosecution for showing homosexual inclinations. However, before Nazism took over European governments, these laws had little impact, as issues related to sexuality were considered part of the private sphere. In Germany, there was a period of relative tranquility for the gay community, which came to an end with Hitler's rise to power. Immediately, laws that defined the desirable characteristics of a citizen began to exclude behaviors and lifestyles considered undesirable. From that moment on, homosexual individuals found themselves harassed and excluded from the public sphere and social recognition. This drastic change marked the beginning of systematic persecution that would leave an indelible scar on the history of the gay community during the Nazi era. It is estimated that between 5,000 and 15,000 homosexuals were prisoners in Nazi concentration camps, where they were identified with the infamous pink triangle. In this ruthless environment, the mortality rate reached a terrifying 60%, considerably higher than that of other persecuted groups. Hunger, disease, exhaustion, beatings, and murder emerged as common causes of death in this dark chapter of history. Below, we will explore the cut-short lives of those who suffered these cruel fates and the consequences they left on the gay community during these dark years. Bertram Schaffner, a man caught in between two worlds. Bertram Schaffner's story is distinguished by the roles he played as a German-American in the tumultuous era that saw the rise of Nazi Germany and World War II. Born on November 12, 1912, to a German-American father and a German mother, Bertram grew up in a Jewish family in Erie, Pennsylvania. His mother, Margaret Rosenbaum Schaffner, came to the United States a few years earlier at the insistence of her father, who wanted her to marry an American. Margaret's marriage, arranged under special circumstances, led Bertram's mother to spend long periods traveling between the United States and her native Germany, taking Bertram with her on trips of up to 6 consecutive months. In his testimony, Bertram shares that during his youth, he felt that he lived between two worlds, neither fully American nor fully German. This duality will become a central element of his unique experience during these crucial moments in history. Due to his training as a psychiatrist, Bertram Schaffner was recruited as a medical officer in 1940, stationed at Governor's Island in New York. His responsibility was to evaluate the mental fitness of recruits for military service, with a particular focus on identifying those suspected of being homosexual. While gays were officially expected to be dishonorably discharged, instead of following this protocol, Schaffner wove a different narrative and thus managed to chart a path of hope. Schaffner found unusual arguments for granting honorable discharges, giving these men the possibility of building a new civilian life after fulfilling their military duty. In this delicate balance between imposed rules and empathy, he created a powerful story that challenged conventions and offered those fighting for their identity a light of redemption in the midst of darkness. Something similar to what Oskar Schindler did, a German businessman who saved the lives of thousands of Jews during the Holocaust, employing them as workers in his factories. His story was immortalized in the movie Schindler's List. This turn in Bertram Schaffner's medical work reveals the moral and human complexity he faced during a tumultuous historical period. In 1982, in the heart of New York, Schaffner wrote a bold chapter in the history of psychiatry by co-founding the pioneering organization Gay and Lesbian Psychiatrists. In an era where the shadow of the closet hung over the profession, Schaffner once again bravely bucked convention by being one of the first psychiatrists to speak out on behalf of sexual diversity. In this scenario of taboos and silences, Schaffner led a revolutionary movement, challenging the social and professional restrictions that kept the gay community in the shadows. His bravery resonated at a time when authenticity and acceptance were a monumental challenge. His legacy endures as a testimony of resistance and change in a time when freedom of expression and authenticity were truly revolutionary acts. Albrecht Becker, an example of resilience. The next case that we are going to analyze in this video is that of Albrecht Becker, who provided exceptional testimony in 1997 at the age of 91. Born in 1906 in the city of DlE, he moved to Würzburg at the age of 18, finding in this new location, far from his family, the freedom to live openly as a gay man. His life took a significant turn when he began a long-term relationship with Joseph Arbert, a professor more than 20 years his senior. Arbert became Becker's intellectual mentor, introducing him to the fascinating world of art and literature. However, this union was cut short when the Gestapo arrested them in 1935. Becker recalls the atmosphere that permeated homosexuals in Nazi Germany, highlighting the sense of security that prevailed. This feeling of relative confidence, despite Article 175, was largely attributed to the fact that the commander of the fanatic youth groups that served Hitler, known as the SA, Ernst Röhm, was homosexual. The general belief was that since Röhm could be openly gay as a Nazi leader, homosexuals in Germany could live without restrictions. However, the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934 radically changed this panorama. The internal power struggle between Röhm and his growing SA army against Hitler culminated in the assassination of hundreds of political enemies, including Röhm, within days. The consequences were the consolidation of Hitler's power as supreme leader and the creation of an extremely dangerous environment for homosexuals living in Nazi Germany. This dramatic turn in Becker's story illustrates the profound impact of political events on the lives of those who fought for their identity and freedom in a time of great adversity. In early 1935, Albrecht Becker received a summons to appear at the police station and face interrogation. The officer in charge, a man named Aryan, asked Becker if it was true that he was homosexual. "Of course," Becker replied. "Everyone in Hamburg knows I'm gay." In the course of the interview, he inadvertently incriminated Dr. Arbert, his mistress, who was arrested by the Gestapo the next day. Becker was detained for 3 months until the trial took place. In an intriguing, ironic twist, it was his attitude of admitting his crimes that finally granted him the chance to escape the concentration camps. Although he was found guilty, he was only sentenced to 3 years in prison in Nuremberg. The other defendants who did not acknowledge the charges were sent to the Dachau concentration camp, where they were never heard from again. In his testimony, the surprising resignation in Becker's voice in the face of great injustice is evident. No trace of anger or sadness, just a slight feeling of indifference. Knowing full well that his actions were illegal, he carried them out anyway. He took the consequences and showed amazing resilience. His story stands out not only for the cruelty of the discriminatory laws of the time, but also for the strength of spirit of those who were affected by them. From the age of 40, Becker becomes his own work of art. He begins to use his body as a canvas for tattoos that would eventually cover all of his skin down to below his neck. The contrast between these drawings and the image of a soft-spoken gentleman is fascinating. Gad Beck, Your Legs Stink of Jew. The story that we will learn about below corresponds to Gad Beck, a Jewish writer who would become an icon of resistance to Nazism in Germany. I was barely 10 years old when the shadows of Nazi intolerance fell over my life. As one of the few Jewish students at my school, I was the target of anti-Semitic comments that poisoned my environment. Can I sit somewhere else? I don't want to be next to Gad. His feet reek of Jew. Echoed the words that left indelible scars on this man. In 1934, his parents decided to enroll him in a Jewish school to protect him, but the financial burden forced them to make a painful decision. At the age of 12, he had to leave school and look for work as a salesman in a store. As the son of a mixed marriage, Beck avoided the tragic fate of many German Jews who were deported to the East. He remained in Berlin, where he made the brave decision to commit to the resistance. My task was clear: help Jews escape to the safety of Switzerland. But my dual identity as a homosexual led me to seek support among those I trusted, other non-Jewish gays who shared our struggle. In early 1945, however, betrayal lurked in the shadows. In a heartbreaking twist, a Jewish spy committed to the Gestapo revealed his identity and that of some of his fellow resistance members. Gad Beck was arrested and taken to a Jewish transit camp in Berlin, where uncertainty and fear wove a dark web over his fate. At the time, Gad had begun a relationship with a man named Manfred Lewin. Although Gad was caught up in the whirlwind of the Holocaust, his love for Manfred led him to perform a bold and ingenious act to try to save him from deportation. Wearing a Hitler Youth uniform, he took the risk of convincing a commander that he needed Manfred temporarily. However, Manfred's tragic fate at Auschwitz left an indelible scar on Gad's history. In an anguishing dilemma, Gad Beck remembers the moment of the heartbreaking decision his lover made. Without hesitation, he turned around and started on his way. In those fleeting moments, watching him leave forever, Gad felt that he could no longer offer the soul determined to walk away from him. The words echoed in the air, full of resignation. "God, I can't go with you. My family needs me. If I abandon you now, I will never be free. In a context where the persecution of homosexuals was ruthless, Gad found in his guidance a clandestine tool for resistance. His network of non-Jewish homosexual contacts became an invaluable resource, providing him with food and hiding places at a time when everyday life was shrouded in horror. In the post-war period, Gad Beck became a true architect of hope and built bridges to an uncertain future. His work focused on organizing Jewish emigration to Palestine, openly defying the wishes of the British authorities. In 1947, Gad, driven by an unbreakable will, undertook the journey to Palestine himself. He did not simply witness, he actively participated in the war that would culminate in the creation of Israel in 1948. Gad, imbued with new purpose, forged a new life in the Promised Land and lived years of happiness. After the war, those affected were not the subject of investigations or compensation. They were also not recognized as victims of Nazism, as homosexuality remained illegal in the successor states of Nazi Germany. Alarmingly, upon their release, many were resentenced and transferred from concentration camps to prisons. Public rejection of this persecution emerged during the gay liberation movement in the 1970s. It was in this context that the pink triangle, previously used as a symbol of shame, was appropriated as a powerful emblem of the gay community. This change marked a significant milestone in the collective consciousness of the brutality suffered by homosexuals during the Nazi era, and underlined the importance of recognizing and commemorating the history of those who were long silenced. Did you know this symbol? Have you ever seen it nowadays? Leave us your answer in the comments box. Pierre Seal, Screams in the Night. In the dark days of World War II, the unique story of Pierre Seal emerges, the last testimony of our video. A French victim who breaks her silence about his harrowing experience during deportation because of his sexual orientation. Born in the idyllic family castle in Haguenau, Pierre, he was the fifth and last child of a wealthy Alsatian Catholic family. As a teenager, Pierre Seal rebelled against the moral restrictions of his family. He attributed his homosexuality to the repression imposed by the Catholic morality of his home, turning him into an irascible young man. Pierre's fate took a tragic turn in 1939, when, at age 16, he was the victim of a robbery in the Square Steinbach, a public garden known as a meeting place for men. When he reported the incident to the police, he was unaware that his name would be registered on the list of homosexuals maintained by the security force, a grim omen of the horrors to come. Since 1792, homosexuality in France was not illegal and was only recriminalized by the Vichy regime in 1942. The German invasion in 1940 shattered Pierre's aspirations to study fabric manufacturing in Lille. However, he completed his training in accounting, decoration, and sales, and sought a modest job as a salesman in his neighborhood, oblivious to the nightmare that would soon consume him. On May 3, 1941, Pierre Seal's life sails into darkness. Arrested, tortured, and brutally raped with a broken wooden ruler, his ordeal was just beginning. After being transferred to the Schirmeck-Vorbrück camp, 30 kilometers away, west of Strasbourg, Pierre wore on his prisoner uniform the infamous blue bar, indicative of Catholics and asocials, different from the aforementioned pink triangle that was not used in Schirmeck. In that inhospitable corner, solidarity faded like a distant dream for homosexual prisoners. These individuals were relegated to the lowest caste of prison society, often being victims of brutality perpetrated by their own fellow prisoners. Seal's story plunges into the abyss of his worst test. In a cruel execution, the Appellplatz echoed with screams and barking as the prisoners were forced into a square. A boy, Joe, Pierre's lover, was brought to the center. Naked and with a tin bucket on his head, tragedy unfolded. Classical music blared from the speakers as the SS men unleashed ferocious German shepherds on Joe. The scene of inhuman brutality remained etched in Pierre's memory. The young man was bitten, devoured, while his screams of agony were amplified by the bucket imprisoning his head. On November 6, 1941, after months of suffering famine, abuse, and forced labor, Pierre Seal was released without explanation and declared a German citizen. Pierre Seal's story appears in the documentary Paragraph 175, which deals with the deportations of homosexuals. Upon his first return to Germany, he received a rapturous ovation at the documentary's premiere at the Berlin International Film Festival. During the Nazi era, the perception towards homosexuals was that they represented weak and effeminate men, considered incapable of contributing to the fight for the German nation. However, the attitude for women was different. Lesbianism was not so persecuted, since it was understood that, despite everything, the women involved could still have children. Ultimately, the goal was procreation, the creation of a society capable of engendering a new, pure, and unique humanity that would eradicate what they considered a scourge. While relationships between men were persecuted to death by law, lesbianism was conceptualized as a temporary and curable disorder. Yes, you heard right. It was considered a temporary and curable disorder. This contrast in the persecution of different sexual orientations denotes the distortion and discrimination rooted in Nazi ideology, which sought to impose its notions of purity and superiority on society. The shocking testimony of these men reveals the fierce struggle of gay individuals against a homophobic regime. And the surprising thing is that this narrative is not an isolated case. The rawness of these aberrant events persists today, showing that, even in the 21st century, the battle against discrimination and homophobia continues to challenge communities in different corners of the world. Thus, we conclude this video, exploring these unforgettable chapters of world history. If you want to see more content like this, let us know your opinion in the comments box. We say goodbye until the next installment of Military History. Thank you very much for joining us.